Welcome to Whiskey Nightcaps, the channel where we do sit before sleep. I am your host, Lil Wayne. No, that's not who I am. Welcome to Whiskey Nightcaps, the channel where we do sit before sleep. I am your host, Jason Davis, and tonight we're talking about terms that you need to know before you make a trip to go purchase whiskey. I think we've all found ourselves at that stage of being a noob, where you go into a dispensary of fine spirits and you see this plethora of whiskeys with all of these different terms on the bottle, most of which are just there to make it sound fancier than they really are. It's just a marketing thing, right? But there are terms that have legal definitions that you need to know so you can make an informed decision. So stick around and let's get into it. These terms will be discussed in no particular order, not alphabetical, not chronological, doesn't matter. That's why you just have to stick around and watch the whole entire video to get all of the knowledge that you need. Let's start. Number one, straight or straight whiskey. I had absolutely no clue what this meant. I'm like, okay, the straight whiskey, is there also LGBTQ plus whiskey? I don't understand. Straight whiskey means that this has been matured for a period of 2 years at minimum, right? So you know that when you purchase this whiskey, it has matured in a cask or in a barrel for a period of 2 years. Now, there are some whiskeys that need to age slightly longer than that for those to be legally defined as whatever type of whiskey it is, but the minimum amount of time that a whiskey has to be aged is 2 years, and that's straight whiskey. All right, so let's follow that one up with bottled in bond. Bottled in bond. This is a legal term that comes from the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897. This was a reaction to a boom in whiskey where people were bottling anything up, slapping a label on it, calling it whiskey, but it truly wasn't. And sometimes this led to sickness and or also death. So this was one of those instances where the government had to step in. I know we don't like government all in our business, but this was a time when it really was rational and necessary. So the government steps in and says, in order for you to label something whiskey, it must be aged for a minimum of 4 years in government bonded warehouses where they were under the watchful eye of Big Brother to make sure that nothing was added to this whiskey that could be harmful to the consumer. Going deeper into that, it must be the product of one distillation season by one distiller, aged for a minimum of 4 years in that federal government bonded warehouse at 100 proof, which means it's 50% ABV. Number three, first fill. Most scotches are aged in barrels that were previously housing some other type of spirit or alcoholic beverage, typically bourbon or some type of wine cask like sherry, Madeira, port wine, so on and so forth. Now, a first fill cask means that in this instance, if they house this or mature this scotch in a barrel that previously held bourbon, that this barrel was only used one time. See, in order for something to be bourbon, it has to go into new charred American oak barrels. You cannot reuse this barrel with whiskey and call it bourbon. So typically they sell these barrels off to other companies, most notably people who make scotch. They mature this scotch in barrels that used to house bourbon. The more times you use this barrel, the least amount of influence that barrel will have on that spirit. Number four, cask strength, barrel proof, foolproof. They all mean the same exact thing. When you purchase whiskey and it's at, say, 40% ABV, which is 80 proof, it usually did not come out of the barrel at that particular percentage of alcohol. It's been proofed down. To proof down means that they slowly introduce water into that whiskey to bring the proof down, or the ABV down, to that 40% for bottling and for them to then put on shelves for the consumer. So cask strength or barrel proof or full proof means that the whiskey that's in that bottle is the same exact ABV or proof as the barrel that it came from. Proceed with caution and don't be afraid. Don't let your ego get in the way and prevent you from adding a few drops of water to soften it. Chill filtered or non-chill filtered. This is something you always see prominently plastered on the label of a whiskey as if it's the all to end all. Now, what is chill filtered in the first place? So most whiskeys go through some type of filtration process before it is bottled and put on the shelves to make sure that all the nasty particles are taken out. To chill filter means to bring that whiskey to a low temperature where fatty acids or what is called congeners are then clumped together so they can be filtered out of the whiskey. If not, when that whiskey reaches a certain temperature, it sort of becomes cloudy, hazy. So this will affect people who put ice in their whiskey or who put it in the refrigerator. I don't know who does that. I drink mine neat, so that whole hazing thing, not a problem for me. But this keeps the whiskey crystal clear as possible, no matter how cold it gets. But again, like I said, this is usually only done for whiskeys that are 46% ABV and lower. Now, in the whiskey community, there is a argument going on about whether or not chill filtering actually affects the experience of drinking that particular whiskey. Some people says it has no effect whatsoever, and there's some that swear that you are removing important parts of that whiskey, which then lend to the flavor and the experience and the mouthfeel of that particular whiskey. Number 6, blended. This can go a couple of ways depending on the type of whiskey, what the country of origin is, and so on and so forth. Blended could be sourced whiskey. So let's say you have a distillery, or not a distillery, but you have a whiskey company that you've started. It's brand new, and you source whiskey, which means that you purchase whiskey from other distillers, and then you blend those whiskeys to create an entirely new whiskey. That's blended. Another meaning of blended is that you mix whiskey with neutral grain spirit like vodka to stretch the inventory of whiskey that you have. So number 7, single grain. Single typically means one distillery. It is misleading to say single grain. You think that it is made from one grain, but no, it's made from one distillery, and it could be made from several different types of grain, some type of malted barley, unmalted barley, maybe there's some corn in there, but it is also aged for a minimum of 3 years. Number 8, single malt. So again, single means that it is made from one distillery. The malt means that it is composed entirely of 100% malted barley. Number 9, single barrel. Single barrel means exactly what it sounds like. So typically when you purchase a bottle of whiskey, that distiller takes a bunch of barrels and blends them together in order to create a consistent experience from one bottle to the next. Single barrel means that they take a single barrel and they empty that into as many bottles as possible without mixing with any other barrels, which means that if you go to the store and you purchase a single barrel and you say this is the best whiskey I've ever had, and you go back and you purchase another one, it's possible it will taste nothing like the one you had before. Number 10, sour mash. Now, when you see this, do not get excited and think that, or get disappointed and think that your whiskey will have a sour type of tinge to it. It has nothing to do with the flavor profile whatsoever. Whiskey is made from a mash bill, which is a mix of grains. For instance, the mash bill of bourbon is 51% corn, and then the other 49% is made up usually of rye or barley or wheat or something like that. A sour mash means that when they go to make the next batch of that bourbon, they take some of that mash bill that was used previously to kickstart a new mash bill. Number 11, peated whiskey. Who's Pete and why is he in my whiskey? Okay, peat is a type of decomposing earth that is burned and used to dry malted barley. I guess I should explain what malted barley is then, huh? Okay, so you have malted barley and you have unmalted barley. Malted barley is when barley is tricked into beginning the germination process. It is then quickly cut short. This is just to bring out some of the sugars to make it easier to distill that whiskey. Now, this is done by steeping the barley in usually typically hot water or warm water. So to dry that barley, they take peat and they set it on fire, and that smoke dries the barley. But that smoke then imparts a smoky type of flavor into the barley. This is typically only done with scotches. There are some peated bourbons and other peated whiskeys, but scotch is the one that is very known, or the ones that I suppose you would say own this process. They own this process. Okay, so I hope you guys have learned something today. I hope you are leaving this video with some type of knowledge. You're getting your keys right now, you're putting your money in your pocket, and you're going to the store, an educated man, so that you can make an educated decision when you purchase your whiskey, to make sure that you feel comfortable with the purchase that you've made and not like you've been duped, because people put all these type of fancy words and stuff like that over the bottle, all over the bottle, to confuse you, to make sure or make you think you're buying the best thing possible. But these are the terms that you need to know when spending your money, to make sure you're purchasing exactly what it is that you want. Once again, thank you for rocking out with your boy. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell to keep videos coming. Support, 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 support. Let's go have our nightcap. You see, I have nothing on the table today. I am dry right now, and it's time to go get wet, baby. Peace.